Hello. Let's talk a little bit about the lottery today. You can see an image of Shirley Jackson. She is the author of the lottery. She was born in 1916 and lived to 1965. Wrote a lot of horror, a lot of mystery, which fits into the short story, The Lottery. And as you glance through a little bit of her bio here, you can see that when she started writing and publishing, she went to the New Yorker and contributed her work there. When the lottery was written in 1948 and she had it published in the New Yorker, there was outrage. People were so upset by this story and by possibly not understanding it well enough um, that she and the New Yorker received hate mail. People rejected it. So it's important to have a better understanding of it. And as you read this story, I asked you to think about the symbolism, the irony, and your papers to write on the theme. So let's go over how we get to the theme. And it's going to be through understanding the characters and their motives and through understanding the symbolism that was presented. So the purpose of this lottery is ironic. We hear lottery, we think good. We think we're going to win money or get a spot at a special school. You don't often picture it with resulting in your life being ended by being stoned to death. But one of the things that was noticed right in the beginning of the story is that it was a farming town and a rural town, and they relied on their harvest. So, one of the things that they did is they sacrificed a person to result in a better harvest, which meant that they would have abundant crops and food for the rest of the village to eat. So, on this beautiful day in the summer, we have a horrible event of one of this small town of 300 being killed and being stoned to death by all of their community, their friends, and their family. That right there is definitely ironic. When you think of 300 people, they all knew each other. Even if it was a random stranger, this is not a good thing to do. It's not proper. But this was someone who was close amongst them. And they believed that once a year, if they did this, if they were to sacrifice one, then more would be able to eat and be okay. So that's the meaning behind it. Now we want to think about the why. Why write about this? Why is Jackson doing this? We're always analyzing an author's actions. And one thing is we always look at setting. And we have this beautiful sunny day. It's June, school's just out, so kids should be happy and excited. But instead we have a death. Death is normally connected to darkness. Winter would be the season of death. So it's ironic that it's summer and that it's a nice day, but we want to think more beyond that as to why. Why did she create an inviting mood for readers to get into this nice, sweet story, how it seems to start off, and then destroy it? You may have noticed foreshadowing in the beginning, or if you read it a second time, you probably would have. The boys collecting the stones. Initially, you think, oh, okay, maybe they're going to skip stones in the water. Maybe they're collecting them, playing with them, building. No, they're getting ready to stone someone to death. And that's kind of why the men are sitting there and it says instead of laughing, they're smiling at each other's jokes because this is uneasy, uncomfortable of an event to be at. If we were to look at symbols, what might stand out or hopefully would have stood out would be the black box and how detailed that was described as the main symbol. And then also the lottery itself can be a symbol. But looking at that worn down, shabby black box, what does it symbolize? It's going to represent the tradition of the lottery, because this is where they're picking the names from, and also the loyalty to it and how the people in this community don't want to let it go. Other communities stop doing it. They're still thriving, they're still living and surviving, but this community doesn't want to let go of that tradition. Even though the black box is falling apart, The color barely shows. It sits in storage for years. They don't want to replace this. The villagers want to keep this same one because they're attached to it. So even though it's been noted that the black box was made from pieces of another older black box, it's still filled with these relics of the past that's been passed down from one generation to the next. So what else might be passed down? What is it a greater symbol of? Traditions. Traditions are often passed down in a family from one generation to a next to a next. Some are wonderful and some are good, but maybe some don't make sense. Maybe society has learned more over time or sees things differently. Now, keep in mind, the only reason these villagers are committed to this box is that tradition. So, this author is really saying something about traditions that we have as society and as people in general. The lottery itself represents any behavior, action, tradition that can be passed down again from one generation to the next. And it doesn't matter if it's illogical, bizarre, or cruel. This lottery is taking place for as long as anyone in this community remembers. It's an annual event. And they say a lottery in June, corn be heavy soon. So they have to sacrifice one, for they are then graced with multiple crops. It may connect in your mind if you know about the Mayan civilization, sacrificing for crops. This is something that was done many years prior to Jackson's time. So we have these symbols that are connected to tradition, and we see that it's ironic of a story. We see that we were foreshadowed and kind of warned what the ending might be, or that the ending might not be as positive. Now we look at it and we think a theme. Now there's always more than one theme, but the main theme that's probably going to stand out is going to be the danger of following traditions and not reflecting upon them. These people just did it year after year, and they didn't stop to think if it was the right thing or not. Now, again, a majority of traditions are positive. Maybe you do Taco Tuesday, or maybe you have religious traditions. You put up a nativity scene. You celebrate the birth of Christ on Christmas. There's no flaws in these. But maybe there's other things that you do, or society does, and you don't think about it. A few years ago, standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, people started to think about it and question if they agreed with it or not, and why or why not. So this story is kind of telling society to consider what they do and why, and make sure that you agree with it. So in this case, everyone agreed with it until Tessie was chosen, and all of a sudden she's thinking, no, wait, this doesn't make sense. Why do we do this ritual and kill someone? But until it hit her personally, she wasn't, or her family or her, she wasn't fazed by it. They just went and did it because it was better for all. So in small towns, tradition is often very important. It links families and generations together. But this author shows not all tradition is always good. I am assuming that traditions like this are not common and not something you're thinking of. But are there other things that could be done? Whereas if you reflected upon them, they're not exactly what you want to represent. Our main theme is going to be that problem of following tradition and not thinking. There's also other themes. One might be kind of like the randomness of persecution. This victim didn't do anything wrong. Their name was just picked from a box. So it's not like this is a punishment. And even if it was, it's not a proper punishment. But there's no reason. It's just a random lottery, a name that's picked. And as soon as Tessie's name is on it, she loses her identity as this friend, as this housewife. All of a sudden, her friends and family and society turn and kill her with just as much enthusiasm as everyone else there. But she's done nothing wrong. Her innocence doesn't matter. All she did was draw this wrong piece of paper. So therefore, she's going to die. So her death really represents an example of how societies can persecute innocent people. So is that happening in our society today, in our country, or in our world? So if you think of present day connections, what's out there? Why are people singled out? Do we have prejudice? Are people um, marked, kind of like the lottery was, for their family background, their geographical region, like where they're living? Are there prejudices about people who live in the South or in New England or in New Jersey, wherever? Are people questioned or marked or prejudiced against for their religion or their sexual orientation, their economic class, their race, their sex? There are a lot of reasons that people stereotype and judge others. Um, they don't result in the actions here, but remember two things. One, authors want to hyperbolize what they're writing to get your attention. So by drawing your attention in, now you're thinking about and reflecting upon actions and traditions. Um, and the more we talk about it, the more it changes. So you might think of lesser extensive things that are done and question them. But she wanted to get your attention. And if she just wrote about Thanksgiving and how a couple of people didn't feel it should be celebrated, but then other people felt it should, it wouldn't interest you as much. This was a wow factor. And we see from the responses of the original readers that she got that wow factor. And the last theme that you could look at in this is also um, how peace and violence coexist. This is a really peaceful community. When you first read it, you might have even thought it was a nice place that you'd like to live. It seems simplistic. Yet this beautiful place, ironically, has this horrible act. And that adds to the shock factor as well. It was unexpected that these nice, kind people on this beautiful day would do this horrible crime. So hopefully that helps you understand better for your paper. Remember, short stories are always in quotes. Summarize briefly, not with every detail, before you jump into your analytical aspects of it. Email me with any questions.